Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. I hope you're doing well today. In today's video, I'm going to show you 6 different methods for defeating Agreth the Nether Spider in the Doom Tower. Now, no matter where your account happens to be, at some point you're going to get into Doom Tower and run into a boss you can't get past. And when that happens, it's very frustrating because you know that your roster has progress in it and there are all those resources in Doom Tower to be gained, but you just can't find a solution for one particular boss. So if Agreth the Nether Spider is that boss for you, you're going to want to watch this video. Let's get started. Just a quick reminder, I live stream every Tuesday and Saturday. On Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, I give away free account takeovers for my Takeover Tuesday live stream. And then on Saturdays, my editor Sana and I take our Noob versus Pro accounts out for a spin, talk to people, get in some trouble, have a lot of fun. So consider joining us for one of our live streams. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and consider joining our Discord community. All right, here I am in Hard Doom Tower. This is the Agreth at floor 30. The reset only happened a few days ago, so this is the only Agreth I have unlocked. I will show all 6 methods here against this Agreth, but they should work against any Agreth, whether it's a normal Doom Tower, hard Doom Tower, whatever floor it may be. Obviously, the higher you move up, the higher the stat thresholds for those fights, and the less leeway you're going to have for little mistakes. But all of the methods should work depending on the roster, the team that you have, and your gear. Okay, before we get into any team compositions, let's take a quick look at the fight. Now, Agreth actually only has 2 attacks, but also has a number of passives that are important. The A1 attacks all enemies and places a poison debuff on all enemies for 4 turns. And then Agreth will repeat this attack 1 time for each Spiderling without any active buffs. Now, there can be 4 Spiderlings. They should have a counterattack buff on them, but if you remove those buffs, then potentially you'll get these extra attacks. The poison debuffs cannot be resisted or blocked, and that's generally true for every poison in the entire fight. The A2 spawns 4 Spiderlings, then places a counterattack buff on all of those Spiderlings for 3 turns. Agreth will then team up with all the Spiderlings to attack all enemies if any Spiderling is spawned by this skill. So the first time the Spiderlings spawn in, this skill will be used. But if the Spiderlings are not killed throughout the fight, then no new Spiderlings will spawn, and this skill will never be used. Agreth has 2 unique passives. The first is Elder Lurker. Agreth counterattacks whenever an enemy decreases Agreth's turn meter. The damage inflicted is equal to the amount of the turn meter lost, will ignore 100% of the target's defense. So this can do a lot of damage to any turn meter controllers, so we generally are going to minimize the amount of turn meter control we bring in. We can bring in some, and it also depends on if you have any other mitigations or how much your HP pool is. There are all sorts of things you can do to get some turn meter decrease into the team, but in general, it's easier if you don't bring in too much turn meter decrease. The second passive is Tide of Toxins, and this will attack all enemies at the start of each turn and deals damage from all poison debuffs on each enemy instantly, and that is every single stack of poison. So if you have 6 poisons and each one has a duration of 3, that's 3 stacks. You have 18 stacks of poisons that are all going to be fired off instantly. Now, when Agreth is attacked by an enemy under a poison debuff, he increases the duration of those debuffs by 1 turn, and then places a poison sensitivity debuff on the champion who attacked. If the champion who attacked did not have a poison, Agreth places a poison on that champion for 4 turns. And these poisons also cannot be blocked or resisted. The poison sensitivity can be blocked or resisted, and it may be worth doing so because that will reduce the incoming damage a little bit. Finally, we have the 3 regular boss passives, Almighty Immunity, Almighty Strength, and Almighty Persistence, but those don't really affect the team compositions or how they're going to work on this boss. All right, so this is our first team composition. Now, the vast majority of teams that you bring in here are going to need an AoE cleanse. You're going to need a lot of cleanses. There are going to be a lot of poisons. So I have Runekeeper Dazdirk as my AoE cleanser. I also have a Doom Priest as a secondary cleanser. You can see I have 3 healers here. You're going to need a lot of healing. RKD, Rector Drath, and Doom Priest all bring healing. In addition, you can also put champions in lifesteal sets. That's not a bad way to go. You could also get a leech on the boss. Runekeeper Dazdirk does have a leech. I don't know if his accuracy is high enough for it to land, but that could also increase our survivability. Now, this team needs to deal with not just the poisons, but the Spiderlings in some way. So what this team is going to do is avoid the Spiderlings completely. And this is the simplest and most direct way of handling this fight. Bring in cleanses, bring in heals, and only hit the boss. As long as you don't hit the Spiderlings, they won't counterattack you. And as long as you don't kill them, they don't spawn in, triggering the big passive. Athel here is going to bring a weaken. Maneater will bring a decrease attack, which is a very good skill to have. And his is at 100% rate, whereas Rector Drath's, I think, is like 30%. This is probably going to be a long fight with a team like this, but this should be able to get through the waves, be healthy when it reaches the boss, and then do the job that it's required to do. Quick note, I do like having a reviver on every team for this fight, because if you lose somebody, it can be tricky, especially if you lose them in the waves. All right, so here we're going to go into wave 1, and I am going to put this on auto at first. Now, I do suggest you actually manual most of these fights, because Agreth isn't a boss you typically farm, it's just a boss that you get through. Affinity Breaker isn't a great set, and so you don't really have a reason to farm this boss for forged materials. Instead, you're basically trying to get through Agreth and get to the higher floors, and then farm somebody else like Griffin. So what that means is I'm going to auto here on wave 1, but when I get to wave 2, I'm going to want to make sure that I have most of my skills available, or at least the important skills available, when I get to the boss. The big one is Runekeeper Dazdyrk's AoE cleanse. So I'm going to let this auto for a little while, but then I'm going to take it over just to make sure that I don't burn through any important cooldowns. As you can see, it's going to take a little while. We don't have a ton of damage. And again, I didn't rebuild anybody for this particular video. These are all my champions built how they are typically, and nobody's specifically built for this fight. All right, so now I'm going to manual just so I can A1 cycle. I want to make sure Runekeeper Dazdyrk's cleanse is up. It is up. So I might lose Athel here though. I did lose Athel. So I'm going to revive Athel. That's why you bring a reviver. Okay, now when you spawn in, you're going to get hit with all of these poisons. You get hit from the boss and then each of the Spiderlings. But now, as long as you don't touch the Spiderlings, they will never respawn and do this big passive attack that they just did. And if you don't hit them, they won't counterattack you either. They will take their turns, and they'll hit you one at a time. It's not a ton of damage. It is somewhat considerable. You have to manage it. But basically, this composition is the don't touch the Spiderlings composition. So we're going to open with Maneater's A1 here. Unfortunately, my cleanser isn't going first, so he's going to get hits from some poison ticks. But I'm doing that A1 so I get the decrease attack out on everybody, and that's going to increase my survivability. And now I can use the AoE cleanse, and I should be in good shape. The good news about the AI on this is if I just hit auto, none of my, well, I only have one champion with an AoE, that's Athel. She will never use it. Your AoE champions will not hit their AoEs on these Spiderlings. They will use their single target abilities. So if you have a champion who has an A1 AoE, you can't bring them in this kind of composition because that will hit these Spiderlings, triggering both the big passive, potentially, if you kill the Spiderlings, and of course, the counterattacks every turn. As you can see, this is going to take a while. Now, there's a chance that someone could die. That's why I have the reviver. But you can also see that Rector Drath is very healthy. Doom Priest is very healthy. So the champions who are likely to die are going to be my attack-based champions who are not nearly as tanky. Now, I'm not going to make you watch this whole fight because it would probably take about 12 minutes. But this is the most straightforward method. Go ahead and just, once you get here, you could probably let it auto. If you need to, go ahead and manual it, especially the tricky parts, because unless you put the skills into the AI, the team composition into the AI, you may get some wonky skill usage. So for instance, I don't need to ever use Maneater's Unkillable buff, so I can just go ahead and make sure he's always A1ing, but I could also put that into the AI if I didn't want to have to deal with that manual. Okay, so that is it for the don't touch the Spiderlings method. So that's method number 1. Okay, now method number 2 is also a don't mess with the Spiderlings method, but in this case, we're going to use the Paragon cheese. Now, if you have Paragon, you can get past Agreth. That's basically all you need. You can see I have a Paragon here. He is only level 40. If he were level 50 or 60, the fight would be faster. This fight could probably take 40 minutes, but the rest of the team is just there to get Paragon to the boss, make sure he's alive through the first wave of poisons, and then they can all die and Paragon can solo the rest of the way. You will have to manual the setup here, but once Paragon is in his unkillable cycle, you can just let it auto run, go have dinner, go take the dog for a walk, come back, you know, see if it's done. If it's not, do something else. It will take a long time. Now, just a quick note here. The champions that I'm running don't matter. Don't worry about the fact that I have some legendaries you don't have, or maybe I have gear that you don't have. Remember, I'm a free-to-play player. I can't swap out the gear on my champions for every video. And also, none of these champions are really built for Agreth because my Agreth solution is completely different, and it's not a team I'm going to be running today. I mean, it's one of these methods, but I just don't want to bring it in here because I'm not trying to show off my team. I'm trying to give you ideas about how to build your team. But the big thing here is I've got 3 wave clearing AoE damage dealers. I've got a nice speed aura here. I've got a revive to make sure that if Paragon dies, he's going to be brought back for the spider boss. And then I have Paragon, who's actually going to do all of the damage on the boss. All right, so let's run this and I'll show you how it works. All right, now just like before, I can go ahead and let the first wave be auto-battled. This should be a lot faster because these are 3 pretty good damage dealers, plus Scylla the Drakes has some AoE damage. But I want to make sure that I don't mess up the second wave. So on the second wave here, I'm just going to manual it. You want to make sure that you kill the Foley first. He is the tune here in the far right because he actually has a skill that will block revives. You don't want to use a CC on him because that will activate a passive that will allow him to go right away. But if he kills your Paragon, the game is over and you're going to have to reset. I'm going to make sure Paragon's unkillable because Brackus here, whatever his name is, this werewolf guy respawns and then he's going to try to kill somebody. He often does. And I wanted to make sure that wasn't Paragon. Now Paragon has his cooldown back, which I need for the beginning of the fight with Agreth. It doesn't matter if any of the other champions die here in this wave. I don't want to use my Scylla the Drake's revive because I'm going to need that on Paragon. Because during this first attack, Paragon is probably going to die. There he goes. So I'm going to need Scylla the Drake's to bring him back. What I'm actually going to do here is try to land the decreased speed. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to hit the boss. All right, let's bring Paragon back. I don't want to trigger any counterattacks. I'm reducing the turn meter a little bit. That's going to make sure that Paragon gets his turn. I can get the slow out there for Scylla the Drakes. That's great. Now Paragon is going to put his unkillable buff on himself. And now Scylla the Drakes can die. I want to make sure I get the unkillable buff up again. So my Scylla the Drakes is fairly tanky, but there she goes. At this point, I can put it on auto because he will always buff himself. I can just click on the boss. I don't know why he hit a minion. That doesn't make any sense at all. He shouldn't have. And now he will just solo the boss. Without triggering any counterattacks, the boss will never get the heals. The counterattacks are what heal the boss. So as long as he doesn't accidentally hit somebody else, this will just be a very slow, very long fight. Like I said, could take 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour and a half. But you only need to beat this boss one time. And so if you're really stuck, but you have a Paragon, guess what? You're not stuck. As you can see, he is unkillable. He's only going to get 1 attack every other turn. There are ways you can speed this up. Obviously, if you have War Master as a mastery, that's going to do more damage when he gets his turn. You could also put him in a toxic set that would put poisons onto the boss. That would speed it up. Additionally, the faster he goes, basically, the more turns he gets, the better off you are. Do not use a relentless set. Do not use a reflex set. You don't want to mess with his cooldowns at all. Make sure none of his masteries mess with his cooldowns at all. You just want him doing as much damage as he can, and then you let him run. The boss has no way to remove this debuff, has no way to CC Paragon, or to kill him through his debuff. So this will just be a permanent loop. Now, as you can see, my Paragon is extremely slow, and so they are getting way, way more turns than I could possibly deal with. This would probably take like 3 hours for this particular Paragon to beat this particular Agreth, but it would work. It would work if I just let it run overnight. I would wake up in the morning, Agreth would be dead, and the fight would be won. So get as much damage onto your Paragon as possible. Try not to run them at level 40 if you can. And there's your other ignore the Spiderlings solution for Agreth. Okay, so now the rest of the teams will be dealing with the Spiderlings in a different way. The nice thing about the Paragon cheese was we didn't need to worry about a cleanser, but in this case, we're going back to those cleansers. So we brought Runekeeper Dazdirk back and Doom Priest back. But again, any cleansers that you have can do the job. Again, we have 3 healers here and 2 DPS. That's pretty typical because we have to deal with all the incoming damage. Now, in this third method, what we're actually going to do is we are going to nuke the Spiderlings out. So we're going to kill them off so that they don't keep counterattacking us. But the problem with that is when the Spiderlings get respawned, they're going to do the big passive hit, and we're going to get hit with a ton of poisons. The second problem can be if we don't nuke out the Spiderlings in one shot and they get counterattacks off, those counterattacks can heal the boss. So in order to deal with the healing, we've brought in Coldheart, who is going to be used primarily here, actually, for her healing reduction on her A1. Padma is our AoE nuker. She should help us kill off the Spiderlings. And then we've got our 3 healers and our 2 cleansers. All right, so we're just going to let the team auto the first wave. And then we got to make sure that we don't auto the second wave because we want to have our skills available when we hit the boss. So I will come back when I get to the boss. Okay, so here I am at the boss. Now, in order for this team to work, I need a couple of things going on. First is I need to get the decreased healing, the healing reduction, onto the boss. And Coldheart has it on her A1. Now, her A1 is a 4-hitter, but it's 4 random hits. And each hit, I think, has like a 25% chance of landing the healing reduction. So if the minions are up, I'm not really going to be able to land my healing reduction. So what I need to do is get these minions off the board and then hit the boss with my A1. So what I'm going to do is open with my cleanse to get everybody nice and healthy. But now what I've got to do is I've got to clear these minions off the board. If I don't, then I can't really use this strategy. So I'm going to use Scylla the Drake's stun. That's going to get some damage down. I only stunned 2 of the minions, so that will actually trigger some counterattacks. Now I'm going to show you what Coldheart's Heartseeker does here. So remember that turn meter reduction is reduced by 50%. And you can see Coldheart took a big hit. I do have a blood shield ring on her. That's where that big shield came from. Now I want to start killing minions. So we're going to do that with Padma there. She's going to get the decreased attack out with the counterattack, which is very nice. And we need to start working our way through these minions. So I'm going to hit the stunned ones. I'm going to hit everybody. And then we killed all of them, which is great. And you can see that the cooldown is still at 2. So we're going to get 1 chance to land this healing reduction from the A1 of Coldheart. Now, this fight has to be manualed because Coldheart will just use this A1 sporadically. Like, it won't be strategic. You'll have to use it at the right moment. But now that I've got the healing reduction out there, now I don't have to worry about hitting the minions so much. They will counterattack and do damage to me. But when they spawn, I'm going to have my cleanse available. Now I'm going to have my AoEs available. And then I'm just going to keep pounding on the team. I'm just going to hit them with everything I've got. I don't have to worry about what skills I'm using at that point. I can still avoid hitting the minions. I don't have to hit the minions. But now I know that if I do randomly hit a minion, that the boss won't get a heal. Looks like my Coldheart's going to die here. That's unfortunate. I am going to just kill a minion here. Get that counterattack. Revive my Coldheart. Do a cleanse. Everybody's nice and healthy. I'm going to try the stun again. I got 2 out of the 3, but you can see this time the counterattack did not trigger a heal because we have that decreased healing out there. So we're going to kill the minions. Again, I'm going to use the Heartseeker just because it hits hard, and I can survive it. And then we'll clear out the spiders again. The slow on the boss is very nice, reduces the number of turns that the boss gets, and the decreased attack is important. Then try the A1. We reapplied the health healing reduction up top, and that's that. That's the method. Basically, again, you will have to manual this. You can see this is a faster method because we have that Heartseeker from Coldheart that she can survive. So you can bring in some turn meter decrease on a team like this. You can also bring in AoE as long as you have nobody who's got an A1 AoE, then you can really control when you use a single target ability, when you use an AoE ability, and you want to bring in AoE abilities to clear out those spiderlings. And then again, the healing reduction is critical here. Don't mess up the healing reduction. Don't accidentally use your A1 at the wrong time or forget to use your A1. It's really important here. I'm talking about Cold Heart's A1 here to get that healing reduction out there. If you got a champion who has a more reliable 100% healing reduction, or if you have two champions that you can bring in, that's important. Remember affinity, right? This Agreth is magic affinity in this rotation. So make sure that you have either a neutral or strong affinity champion who's applying your heal reduction. Okay, so that's it for the Nuke the Spiderlings method. And now we are on to method 4, which is to CC the Spiderlings. So in this particular case, I'm still bringing Cold Heart for her healing reduction, just because we are going to be hitting the Spiderlings, and I want that as an insurance policy. That'll keep the fight from being indefinitely extended with the heals. Now, again, just a reminder, you don't need any of the champions that I happen to be bringing. These are just the champions I have that are good illustrations of this method. So I'm bringing in 2 champions with freezes and 1 with petrification. It doesn't matter if you're using stuns or freezes, doesn't matter. But you do want a champion that has a 100% chance to land their CCs. So don't bring in any weak affinity champions. So in this case, no spirit affinity champions for the magic version of Agreth. I still have 2 cleansers, I have 2 healers, and I have 2 damage dealers. Plus I have a shield. I have a whole lot of defenses here, increase attack, increase defense. So this team should work quite well in this fight. But again, we need to make sure that we land the CCs on the Spiderlings and then deal with any potential counterattacks with the healing reduction. So let's fire this up and see how it goes. Now again, I'm just going to let this auto the first wave. Then I'm going to manual the back half of the second wave to make sure I have all of my cooldowns available. And I will meet you when we get to the boss. Okay, so here we are at the boss. As you can see, I've got my cleanse available on Mithrala, so I'm just going to use that now. And then I'm just going to use the heal on Pythion. Now here is Shiramani's A3, which has a 100% chance to land a freeze, and she is neutral affinity. So unless she gets 3%ed here, she should land all 4 of these freezes. And she does. And now I have the freedom to basically do whatever I want. You could bring in an HP burn champion, an AoE HP burn champion here, just to utilize these Spiderlings to do more damage. In this case, I've brought basically a single target HP burner, an activator, which is Ninja. And so Ninja's going to do some damage there. Again, Cold Heart can use her Heart Seeker here as long as I have the healing and I have everybody frozen. All right, so remember, we don't want these Spiderlings to counterattack, and they won't with the freeze on them, but they will potentially respawn doing damage at the beginning of the round. That's fine. We can get that healing reduction out there if we kill them off, but if we don't kill them off, then we need them CC'd, because remember that Cold Heart's AoE is, her A1 is a random hitter. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and keep hitting the boss, putting as much damage out there as I can. And if the minions happen to die, then great, but I'm not going to specifically target them to kill them off. Those HP burns do a little bit of work there, but now you can see that the Spiderlings, the 2 on the left, are actually no longer CC'd. So now I'm going to see if I can kill them off. One shot 1. Got the second one. And got the third one. So this should be relatively easy going. Obviously, these are very strong champions, and they're built a little bit better than some of my other champions or the champions on my other teams. But you can see this one's not going to be particularly difficult. This, I think, is maybe the easiest method overall. If you have 1 or 2 champions who have 100% CC, whether that's a stun or a freeze, I highly recommend going with this method. If you have Shiramani, she's beautiful for this because she also brings a really chunky heal on her A2. If you have Mithrala, Mithrala is great as a cleanser. Again, you could use Runekeeper Dazdork here. You could use Doom Priest. You don't have to change these champions. I've just changed them up to show you that there are a lot of champions available for solutions on this boss. So we're going to call it there for this method, but that is the CC method. And again, you can CC the Spiderlings and then kill them off, or you can CC them and leave them alive as long as you don't have some random AoEs like Cold Heart's A1 activating their counterattacks, you're usually fine. Okay, we are up to method number 5, and that is to buff strip the Spiderlings. We're actually going to take the counterattacks off of the Spiderlings. Now, this is tricky because if you remove the buffs from the Spiderlings, when the respawn happens, that will also trigger the big attack. So what we need to do is remove the buffs, the counterattacks, and then kill the Spiderlings off before that comes around. That means we will be hitting the Spiderlings with this method, but we can actually use them to our advantage now. We're going to use Artak, who's an HP burner, and so the more targets we have out there to HP burn, the more damage Agreth is going to take. We still have 2 cleansers and 2 healers, but we brought in Lady Kimmy here to strip the buffs. Okay, let's go ahead and fire this one up and see how it goes. Just like every single team, I'm going to auto the first wave, and then I'm going to manual the second wave because I need to make sure I have Lady Kimmy's buff strip available. I also want to have Artak's full complement of HP burns available when I get to the boss. Okay, so here we are at the boss. You may have seen Artak did counterattack. When you counterattack, you don't trigger the counterattacks by the Spiderlings, so counterattacks are completely fine here. But what I'm going to go ahead and do with Kimmy is I'm going to remove, you can see she removes 1 random buff, but there's only 1 buff out there. So she's just going to go ahead and do that. She missed on 1 of the Spiderlings. She is not weak affinity. She has plenty of accuracy. So what must have happened is the 3%. That's unfortunate. But we're going to go ahead and try this anyway. So we're going to use Artak's HP burns. We are going to use the Heartseeker. We can go ahead and attack the minions just fine now. Let's get the slow out there. You'll notice the stun happened. I do have Artak in a stun set, so that didn't happen because there was a stun available. It was just the stun set that activated there. Let's kill the minions. And now when we get around to Cold Heart, we will try to apply the healing reduction debuff. There it is. And now we're pretty much fine. Okay, so the only thing I want to make sure is that my buff removal ability is always up when the minions spawn. Everybody has Wukong, but Wukong is tricky because he's actually weak affinity against this version of Agreth. So I probably wouldn't use Wukong unless you have that healing reduction, maybe a more reliable healing reduction on your team. And then if you get counterattacked by 1 or 2 of the minions, it won't be such a big deal. But preferably you have maybe a Sethalia, or you have a Lady Kimmy, or you have somebody who can, you know, even a Madame Saris would be really good because she doesn't actually hit, so you don't have to worry about weak hitting, and she's void affinity anyway. So you could potentially use a Madame Saris, but just get your buff removal champion to have their skill up every time the minions spawn, so then you can just not worry about them, kill them off at your leisure. And again, you can kill them or not kill them. It's entirely up to you. We don't have to watch this. We have 1 more method to go, so let's go hit that one. Okay, here is our 6th and final team. This is the Unkillable method. Now, in this particular case, I've got 2 unkillable champions. I've got Helikath and I've got Emic. You don't need both. You just really need 1, preferably a block damage champion. That's usually better. If you're going with Unkillable, you might want to bring in 2 champions just to be sure. I do have a little bit of healing here with the Painkeeper, but she's primarily here to reduce cooldowns. Likewise, Emic reduces cooldowns, and Renegade reduces cooldowns. Cold Heart is here for the healing reduction, because with this team, we don't have a cleanse, and that's what the block damage buff is going to help us through. We're going to get through the poisons by not taking damage, but we are still going to potentially be hitting the minions, and so we want to bring in a healing reduction. Now, you don't have to. If you have this tuned so that you basically can just use single target abilities, you could treat this like the very first method, which is to not hit the Spiderlings at all. You don't kill them, you don't touch them, and you're totally fine. The only problem here then is you'd probably have to remove Painkeeper as well, because she heals on her A2. Now, maybe you don't need any healing at all with this method. It's entirely up to you, depending on the roster that you have. You could bring in a second Renegade, you could bring in a Kaimar, you could bring in a Yumiko, you could bring in anybody who has a reset ability, or you could bring in 2 or 3 block damage champions, like you could bring in a Demitha. And then, you know, as long as you're tuned properly, and again, you don't have to like put it into a calculator or anything, you just have to try it out to see if the tune's going to work. But as long as you're tuned properly, you don't actually need healing. So let's go ahead and try this last method. Same thing as before, I'm going to manual wave 2 and I'll see you at the boss. Okay, so this composition has no cleanse. And that means we're going to take all of these poisons. We're going to get hit by them. So we're going to put up the block damage right away. Block damage will block poison damage. So now everybody gets a turn and you can see they just don't take any damage. Now I am going to use Renegade's cooldown reduction right away. So that's going to decrease the cooldown of that block damage. And then I can use Emic's ability and Painkeeper's ability to reduce Renegade's ability as well as Hellcat's ability. So I've got a lot of cooldown reduction here. You don't need this much. You don't need this many unkillables. I'm going a little bit over the top here. You just need to find one champion that can do this and maybe a bit of cooldown reduction to make sure it works. Or you have to run your team fast enough that you can get back around to that cooldown to make sure you always have it available. I've decided to just AoE everybody and try to kill the minions here. You don't have to. Again, you could ignore them completely. But because I have Coldheart with that A1, she will be hitting some minions. So I want to try to kill them off. And then apply that healing reduction and then go from there. I also have a lot of shields available. So if I don't have a block damage buff, I can always put those up instead. And in fact, Hellcat's shield hits very hard, so it's good at killing minions. So in this case, I just used it for that reason. Now, I have a second heal reduction here available on Renegade's A1. It has a low chance, but it's worth using. Just going to try to get that out there. Watch the cooldown timers of the boss so you know when the skills that you need to know about are about to be applied. The weaken from Hellcat's A1 is nice. That's going to improve my damage. I can also get a decreased speed out there potentially. Yeah, that's going to help as well. And then hopefully I can get the decreased healing. There we go. Healing reductions applied. And now at this point, I'm basically home free. The next boss's turn will spawn the Spiderlings. So potentially I want to have at least a shield up for that. And then I can put the block damage buff up on the next turn. Or I could put the block damage buff up now. You really have to figure out how the composition is going to work in terms of your speed tune. But this is why I brought 2 unkillable champs. So I'm going to go ahead and actually apply the shield now. And that's going to reduce the amount of damage I take when the boss goes. There's the boss going. So the shields hold. Now I get all the counterattacks. Or not the counterattacks, the regular attacks. But again, I have that healing reduction out there. So I'm going to go ahead and AoE. I am going to get some counterattacks. I need to get my block damage buff up there. Let's see, I'm going to put my unkillable out there for now, just in case. And then I'm going to put the block damage buff up there. That wasn't optimal, but I have a lot of cooldown reduction, so it should work out just fine. All right, and that is it. Basically, again, I have to manual this fight. This is probably the most complicated of all of the compositions because it does require you tracking not only the boss's cooldowns, but your cooldowns and making sure that you know exactly when all of the abilities are going off. You still need to have the healing reduction ability. You need to hit that at the right time. And if you mess it up, the boss is going to heal and it's going to take longer. But an unkillable composition would absolutely work on Agreth. And this is actually closest to the composition I typically use. I have a cleanse and an unkillable comp going at the same time. So I use my Cardiel, who has a cleanse. And then I use my Hellcat, who has the block damage. And together, they do a lot of work for me. Okay, so that's it for the 6 different methods. But I do have one last treat for you. I've switched to my level 55 noob versus pro account here. So this is my new account. And I just want to show you that these methods can work no matter where you are in the game, as long as you have the champions to fulfill at least one of these team compositions. So on this account, I'm going to be taking on the floor 30 Nether Spider in the normal Doom Tower. And this is my team. Remember that the AI will basically shut off my AoEs, so I don't have to worry about Runekeeper Dazdirk or Athel using their AoEs, or even Stagnite. Stagnite won't use his AoE either. I do have 2 weak affinity champions here, which I wish I didn't have, but I'm bringing Stagnite primarily for his slow, and then Runekeeper Dazdirk for both the leech and the turn meter fill. Now, I think his turn meter fill also won't fire unless I manual it, but I've got my reviver, I've got my cleanser and Runekeeper Dazdirk. I have 3 sources of healing. I've got my weaken on Athel, and everybody's got a single target ability, and that should be enough. So let's fire this up and see how it goes. I'll see you on the other side. And there you have it. It was close to full auto. Got a little bit tricky there at the end. I could have saved Runekeeper Dazdurk's cleanse for the very last round, but he fired it a little bit early. But as you can see, the method here was avoid the Spiderlings, don't hit them at all, and then you basically don't have to worry about it. You bring a cleanser, you bring some healers, you bring single target damage, and you burn through the boss. Okay, that is it for the 6 different methods for burning through Agreth, the Nether Spider. There may be a 7th or 8th or 10th out there, I don't know. If you have one that I didn't mention, please put that in the comments below. And if you use one of these 6 methods, let me know which one you like to use the most. I hope everybody out there has at least one of these methods available to them, because this is a boss you basically want to burn through and move on from. You don't even need to farm this guy. You just need to get past him. And so I hope that if you didn't realize you had one of those 6 compositions available, now you do, and you can keep progressing in DOOMTOWER. All right, that is it for me today. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and consider joining our Discord community. I've been Colred, and I will see you in another video soon.